Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Economic Development, Investment and Trade. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement? Yes. The Honourable Minister.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Pleasure to be in the chamber this morning. Talk about the new and revised Department of Economic Development, Investment and Trade. I will say from our government's perspective that economic development is very important for our government, and we're taking steps to improve the economic conditions in Manitoba and to get Manitobans back to work. Recovery and growth is our top priority as we work our way through the pandemic in what we all hope is a post-recovery stage. I think we all recognize that when we have Manitobans working, that generates the income that we need to support our social services, such as our record investments in healthcare, $7.2 billion, record investments in K-12 and post-secondary education, and also the social services that Manitobans come to expect. That's why economic development is so critical for Manitoba and, in fact, for Manitobans. So a new department, revised department, as I said, clearly economic development and how we improve that climate. We added the word investment, and we want to make sure that we have private sector investment coming to Manitoba. And trade. Clearly, Manitoba is a trading province, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that we seize every opportunity when it comes to trade. So realignment, reassessment, reinvestment in trade within the department. Obviously, we'll be working closely with our other partners in this front. And clearly, I think a discussion piece this morning will be about our potential and existing labor shortages we have across the province. To assist in this endeavor, we have created a new Economic Development Committee of Cabinet, which will be chaired by the Premier. The concept here is we will expand the capital availability, modernize the department, hopefully some regulations and programs and services along the way. We will expand markets through these trade initiatives and increase the speed at which government responds to issues. We will also support the Cabinet Committee with a secretariat, and we have brought Michael Swiston in as the secretary to the Cabinet. Tracy McConaughey has moved over to the associate secretary role. We do want to make Manitoba as competitive as possible to attract and retain capital. We just recently announced $50 million initial seed money for a venture capital fund. We think that will attract additional investments in Manitoba companies. We believe this initial $50 million investment will serve as a catalyst for development. So these funds will be managed by third parties, and we think this is a great catalyst to leverage additional funding for Manitoba companies. Tax competitiveness is certainly an important aspect. We have made cuts in this budget to the payroll tax, taking 200 businesses off the payroll tax, reducing the payroll tax for another 800 businesses. Another important move is the small business venture capital tax credit. We have made that permanent, and we've also expanded it to be applicable to the venture capital funds. We also have a suite of other equity and industry tax credits available to Manitobans to spur on investment here. We are committed to reducing red tape as it relates to Manitobans and Manitoba businesses. CFIB has recognized Manitoba as the top province in red tape reduction in 2021, but more work needs to be done on that front. And we are committed to working with Manitobans and, in fact, the business community to continue to reduce red tape. We will be supporting innovation and digital adaptation. We have a number of programs available for that. We have an innovation growth program. We have 32 projects supported under that program since 2019. We have the Digital Manitoba initiative. We have over 1,000 applications to that particular initiative. Workforce and skills development is a priority for our department and our government. I think this is key in terms of tackling our labor shortage issues that we're facing. Just this past week, we introduced $1 million to support some of the hardest hit industries as a result of the pandemic. This would be the restaurants, hospitality sector, supply chain, and food and beverage industry. These programs and projects are designed to facilitate recruitment and retention of skilled workforces within those respective areas. I will also say that within our budget, we've set aside employment and training financial assistance of $76 million. We have another $30 million set aside for workforce development funding, including the recently announced Canada-Manitoba Job Grant, which is a $10 million fund. That's $2 million more than last year. We do support a number of sector councils through our sector council program, and that's certainly working closely with industry to make sure we understand the issues that they are facing. Just a little bit more trade. Obviously, Manitoba is a trading province, and we're doing everything we can to make sure we capitalize on those opportunities. So we have earmarked additional money in our budget for that to support trade. I also do want to just briefly touch on Indigenous reconciliation. Obviously, collaboration with Indigenous people is important as we try to advance our shared goals. We have set aside money for that to assist in that, and we'll be working with our sector councils to deliver skilled trades training initiative for Indigenous people, including Indigenous women as well. So we're continuing to work with Indigenous communities and partnerships, and we think there's tremendous opportunity in the workforce for Indigenous people here in Manitoba. Certainly Manitoba remains open for business. We are committed to working and listening to business, industry, and to all Manitobans. We're focused on opportunities for development and economic growth. This is so very important for us. And just before I close, I do want to make a comment in terms of our government's work in preparing for the arrival of Ukrainians here to Manitoba. Our Deputy Minister's Committee, I think, has addressed so many issues that have to be addressed for the arrival of these people from the Ukraine. Our welcoming center is up and running, and we're certainly, arms are open to welcome those people, I believe, coming soon in May, just in a week or two, so we look forward to their arrival. And I know from the business community too, they are certainly looking forward to the potential of additional workforce here in Manitoba. Obviously, we will have to determine who is coming and their ability to enter into the workforce. Clearly, there will be educational and skill opportunities for us here to upskill. I think the English as an additional language will probably be very important. That training will be very important. And if these folks arriving from the Ukraine want to enter in the workforce, we will certainly do whatever we can to help facilitate that as well. And I know the business community is welcoming that in the very near future as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's my opening remarks.
We thank the Minister for those comments. Does the official opposition critic have any opening comments? The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your opening statement. in your comments and highlights that you've brought forward with regard to economic development in the province of Manitoba. I'm looking forward to having a chance to chat with you today and question you as to the details of the budget and the estimates process. I'd like to thank department staff for the work that they do each and every day to keep the department running and keep our economy flowing. I also think it's important that we acknowledge that there's important work that's done by the department. Economic development, investment and trade has an important job to ensure that we have supports for businesses, supports for the workers in those businesses, attracting investment, and the ability to trade in our province. And while we support those efforts, we also want to make sure that we take a lens appropriate to the time that we're in. We're coming off a pandemic that affected Manitobans in very serious ways economically. Many people lost their jobs. Many people had to reduce hours and take wage cuts. Many people had to shift to more flexible hours because of childcare concerns. Many people decided to leave the workforce to go back to re-educate themselves, or some other people chose to look for other opportunities outside of Manitoba. And while many Manitobans face these issues, I think it's clear that some of the people who faced the most issues during the pandemic, during the last 2 years, have been women, have been people in the BIPOC community. Women have often faced the challenge of leaving their jobs for childcare more so than men. And they faced a harder economic time. People in the BIPOC community also worked jobs that are far more precarious and more prone to shutdown during the various phases and lockdowns of the pandemic. And as we're sitting here in the spring of 2022, and we're looking at our economic development policies and finances in the budget, it's on us in this place to put forward policies and economic plans that will not only boost all Manitobans, but in particular, those who are the most hit and most affected by the pandemic. And so I hope to hear from the minister today, throughout our discussions, that he has put a great deal of thought into how he's going to work in our work to improve our economy for those who were the most affected by the downturn, by the people who have suffered the most. Not just any and every business was hit in the equal way. Many businesses did just fine. Many businesses, in fact, thrived throughout the pandemic. But it's the ones that, the people who were the most affected, the businesses that were the most affected, and the people, the workers who were the most affected during the pandemic, which I think the minister should find ways throughout his programming, in all areas of his programming, to improve their condition and their situation. So I hope to hear that in these discussions as we go through our questions and our time during the estimates process. We know that there's a track record of this government having not maybe considered those folks and those businesses. And there was, I think, certainly areas over the course of the pandemic where, businesses were calling for more supports or more clear supports or more effective supports from this government. And I think we'll take some time to highlight some of those issues and discuss and see if there's ways that, our government can learn from those moving forward in a more effective way. And I just want to say that in the closing of my opening remarks that I look forward to the discussion. I look forward to some good open and honest dialogue with the minister. And I hope that, through this dialogue we can bring about a stronger, more equitable economy in Manitoba. Thanks.
We thank the critic from the official opposition for those remarks. Under Manitoba practice, debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we will now defer consideration of line item 10.1A contained in Resolution 10.1. So, at this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber, and I would ask the minister and the critic to please introduce their staff in attendance. Would the Honourable Minister like to introduce his staff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Catherine Gerard, the Deputy Minister. I have Michelle Wallace, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Industry Programs and Partnerships Branch, and Melissa Ballantyne, Assistant Deputy Minister, Finance and Corporate Services.
We thank the Honourable Minister for that brief introduction. Would the official opposition critic like to briefly introduce their staff? The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you. Yes, our staff here, Mark Rosner, Chief of Staff.
We thank the critic for that introduction. In accordance with Sub-Rule 77, Subsection 16, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner with questions put on the resolutions once the official opposition critic indicates that questioning has concluded. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you very much, and I just want to begin by welcoming the staff to the chamber. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I thank you for the work that you do each and every day to help run the department and our economy in Manitoba. I appreciate that. I want to just begin by just asking some basic factual questions which the Minister can endeavour to deliver to us if he likes. Can the Minister provide a list of all technical appointments in his department, including the names and titles?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too, while I have them in front of me, thank my senior staff as well for the work they do in the department. And certainly appreciate all they've done over a couple of them for many years. They were here back when 6 years ago when I was in the economic development portfolio. So they've stayed with the department, so they have a wealth of knowledge over those last few years. And of course, Deputy Minister Gerard just started here in March. So relatively new to this portfolio, but not necessarily new to government, and certainly has an appreciation for the private sector. And at this time, I do want to thank all of the staff within the department too that do the day-to-day legwork. And it is very valuable work, as my critic will understand. This is about ensuring that Manitobans have every opportunity to get back to work. And we do have a lot of staff dedicated to make sure that people have those opportunities. So in terms of the technical officers, in my department or in my office, I have Tyler Segogian, who is Special Assistant, Taylor Schul, who is the Executive Assistant, and Michael Swiston, as I mentioned earlier, is the Secretary to the Economic Development Board of Cabinet.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Thanks. I began my last question with a thanks to the department staff. I also wanted to take a minute to thank staff on our side. Mark is here with me today, all the staff behind the scenes who prepare our team to do the job that we do. So just thank you. Shout out to all the staff who work for us as well. Can the minister provide me with a current vacancy number, the current vacancy numbers, and the percentages for each division of his department?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry for a delay. We were doing some math over here to give you the breakdowns. So overall, and this is reflective of the end of February. So there's been some adjustments since then. We could probably follow up on some numbers after that, but as of the end of February, across the department, we had a 23% vacancy. We combined finance and corporate services and economic and labor market policy together. They have, at that time, a 23% vacancy. The Workforce Training and Employment branch had a 25% vacancy at that point in time. And then if we combine the industry programs and partnerships with the Economic Opportunities Navigation Unit, combined a 13% vacancy there. So that's as of the end of February. Since that time, we've hired 20 additional staff, and we have 16 more positions that we're actively seeking employment for, so that's in the works. What you're looking for.
The Honourable Member for St. Paul.
So in previous estimates book, it used to provide a lot of information. Would the minister undertake to provide me with a 5-year comparison of department appropriations? And I'm looking for a 5-year comparison of each appropriation funding as well as the FTE.
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the members' line of questioning here. So I think back to the vacancy numbers total. So we have 80. We had 80. That was at the end of February. We had 80 vacancies out of 369 positions across the board. Since then, out of that 80, as I mentioned, we hired 20, and in the process of employing another 16, which will hopefully happen fairly quickly. To the member's specific question, that would be quite an undertaking. I can tell you, since when I was here 6 years ago, 5 years ago in this department, it was a substantially different department then. Vis-a-vis, we had a smaller government. We had 12 ministers at the time, and now we have, I believe, 18 ministers. So there's been a fundamental restructuring of departments over the course of those 6 years. And in fact, there was pretty regular changes in the structure of government over that particular time. And I would say, in particular, I will use the term economic development department in general terms, because there's been different components involved in that. And for the members' benefit, when I was here initially, when we came to government, we had a number of sectors included in there, including labor, mining sector. We had the trade sector involved. We had the tourism sector as well. So it was certainly a completely different looking department than it is today. Today's department has a focus on the economic development pieces of the puzzle, including the investment and trade. So a lot different department than we had 6 years ago, and certainly even a different department than we had prior to January. So to undertake that over the course of a number of years would be a challenge. We could certainly give global numbers. I think that's relatively easy to provide global numbers, and then what areas were associated with those respective departments, because there's been different training functions attached to the economic development portfolio. There's been some other areas that have moved around within government. I think what we could do for the member is, in global terms, go back and look at the changes over the years, and if we could just provide him a global number in terms of staffing, and we could provide a description in terms of what was included in that respective department. To get into the specific breakdown by branch would be an overwhelming task, and quite frankly, I'm more interested in getting Manitobans to work and the opportunities they have, so that's been our focus. So hopefully the member would be satisfied. We'll get the broad numbers, and then if we want to have a further discussion about that, I'd be more than happy to have that with you.
The honourable member for St. Patel.
Thank you for the response. I gladly accept your undertaking to provide those figures in a global assessment, as you suggested. I mean, I do think that, in some ways, as you mentioned, you're focused on moving the economy forward. In order to move it forward appropriately, sometimes you have to look at the successes and failures of the past. So that's why a past 5-year analysis might be appropriate in terms of your future decision-making and making sure that they're correct and in the best interest of Manitoba. So even though it might be quite an undertaking for your department, it might also be useful for ensuring that we're staying on the right course in Manitoba. In terms of your first point with respect to vacancies, I just want to follow up on that and ask the minister, that's fairly significant vacancy rate, end of February being near that 23, 25, it's almost 1 in 4 positions specifically are gone. You look at the workforce training and employment, FTE is there. It's a pretty significant vacancy rate. And I'm wondering specifically that if this vacancy rate is hampering the work that the department is trying to accomplish. And if the minister, and what concrete steps is the minister doing to fill this vacancy rate?
The Honourable Minister.
Yes, well, thanks for that line of questioning. And I get the member's point about structure when it comes to government and how economic development is carried out. And there can be changes in philosophy in terms of what economic development looks like and the structure of delivering economic development. And I will say, even within government, our government, that's changed from time to time. So I think what we've done this time is a real focus on the economic development component of it. Clearly, over the last couple of years, we've gone through the whole COVID challenge, and government is not immune to changes during that time. You mentioned the same thing where we had in the workforce people changing jobs and careers and going back for education. And what we're finding is Manitobans in the workforce are more mobile than ever before. And I would suggest government is very similar. There's always opportunities for either moving from department to department or up in a department or going back to school and getting into the private sector. So those opportunities do exist, and we certainly have seen that over the last few years. I will say, once we get, probably over the next month or a month and a half, once we get these additional 36 positions in place, 20 of which are in place now, our vacancy rate will be down to 12%. So I would say under the new department, effective in January, we made tremendous strides in making sure that these positions are full. Obviously, there was some realignment in January in terms of what positions would be where, and creating new positions and so forth. I think we're well on our way to getting back closer to the regular vacancy rate is somewhere 8% in that range. So we're in the next month or two, we'll be very close to that range. We certainly want to make sure that we are providing services to Manitobans. We want to make sure that we are getting money to support Manitobans and Manitoba businesses so that they can hire in a timely manner. That's our goal, and we've certainly made improvements here in the last couple of months to that end.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Yeah, I thank the Minister for the response. In terms of vacancies, it's important to address that issue, not just from the government perspective, but from end users' perspective, the businesses in Manitoba. Like, I've heard from businesses who've said that, that they're looking for additional services. And, when I see vacancy rates as high as 1 in 4 in some areas, it makes me wonder about whether that staffing shortage in the department would, if filled, would allow for better service to some of the businesses who are relying on hearing from the government. So I think there's a correlation there, and I want to make sure the Minister is aware of that and is able to address that. I want to spend some time today to look at the Shop Local campaign a bit and talk about the government programming during that pandemic. The Minister, I can provide you actually with the Minister with a copy of the contribution agreement between the Economic Development and Training and the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce. The agreement assigns $500,000 to Good Local, and that's 1/3 of the total funding for the Shop Local campaign. So I'd like to ask the Minister what kind of analysis he's done, and when I say analysis, I mean return on investment, interjurisdictional analysis, and are examples of what I mean. What sort of analysis was done in advance of this agreement in preparation to create this agreement between economic development and the Manitoba Chamber. I'd like to just table the document now. Yeah.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we were happy to support Manitoba businesses over 2 years during the pandemic. In fact, we're still supporting Manitoba businesses with programming. We've provided Manitoba businesses over $650 million in funding. 38,000 businesses and organizations being represented in that $650 million. So a lot of different programs were put in place. And I will say, we put these programs in place because we had regular conversations with stakeholders across the province. We invited the business community in on a regular basis. I think the ministers at the time were having at least weekly calls with the sectors. So there would be 30, 40 sectors represented on these calls. And we were dealing with Business Council, chambers, Manitoba chambers, the Winnipeg chambers, all the sectors were represented on those calls as we worked through the pandemic. And there was regular dialogue about what kind of supports would be needed, especially as the regulations around shutdowns were evolving. So it was completely an evolving process as health situations changed. So that's really precipitated the ongoing discussions. So a number of programs came out of those discussions, and the good local that the member refers to was part of a $1.5 million retail shop local program. The program overall supported 388 vendors. At that time, it was like a pivot to an e-commerce platform, and 1,700 businesses received reopening support. So certainly a lot of vendors were supported by that particular retail shop program. Now, because there was a number of programs going on over the course of the last 2 years, and there still is programs going on, quite frankly, we as government didn't think we had the ability to manage all of those programs. That's why we would sign an agreement with, in this case, the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce to manage those particular funds. So we as government supplied the funds, in this case to the Chamber. The Chamber made the decisions in respect of where they felt best value for that money for those programs. And that's particularly what happened in this case. So the Shop Local, specifically, that campaign, was to support the development of a one-stop shop for Manitobans to safely purchase goods from local businesses. So we as a government and certainly the Chamber are supportive of supporting local business. And that was really the impetus behind the Shop Local campaign, the retail Shop Local. It's about Manitobans supporting Manitoba businesses. And in this case, decisions on the funding was done by the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
I thank the minister for his response. I think I just want to get back to the heart of the question that I asked. It was specific to the analysis done before the agreement was signed. And I say that because this is, a large amount of money. As the minister said, a program that affects a lot of businesses, a lot of small businesses, and we acknowledge the challenges small businesses face during the pandemic. We do think it's important to support them at that time. We just want to make sure the government is doing their due diligence so that they're making the right and proper decisions to help as many businesses as possible in the most cost-effective way. And so that's what comes back to my question around analysis. What kind of analysis was done in advance of this agreement?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, as I indicated before, there was ongoing discussions with the business community and Manitobans on a regular basis. Clearly, from our perspective as government, engaging in this particular case with the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce, they are reflective of all the chambers across Manitoba, and they would have a very good insight in terms of what the requirements and needs would be of the the business community, including a lot of small businesses. So they certainly bring a unique perspective to the table. I think a good perspective, because it does engage every corner of the province in that discussion. Clearly, there was discussions with Manitoba Chamber of Commerce, with government, before signing the agreement. You don't have discussions without formulating a 19-page contract. So obviously there was lots of back and forth in terms of putting this particular contract together. At the end of the day, the government had faith that the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce would administer this course, this fund. I will say we have provided the Chamber additional funding. We're still have some money outstanding that hasn't been allocated yet. Again, we're working very closely on that front with some of the money that hasn't been allocated. Again, but that was a different agreement than this particular agreement. So a lot of discussion beforehand, a lot of discussion during formulating this particular agreement, and then obviously lots of discussions subsequent to this about additional assistance to the business community.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thanks, Minister, for the response. So when I asked about what kind of analysis was done in advance of the agreement, the Minister suggested that there were discussions that happened, and then he relied on the insight from the Chamber of Commerce. While I think those things are important, they're clearly not analysis. So is that the type of analysis work that the department does before it makes a $1.5 injection into our economy? They just have discussions with no concrete analysis on what's the return going to be, what impact it will have on our overall economy. And I say this also just from the frame of, we look at even just to the start of the pandemic, throughout the pandemic and the government's history with providing some of these programs. There were many support programs that quite frankly failed. They were well underspent, and they reached far less businesses than they were intended to, and they quite frankly didn't work. And so having had that track record early in the pandemic, it now proposes the Shop Local campaign, and I think it would be would have been wise of the government to actually do some due diligence and proper analysis on this project before signing an agreement. But instead of actual analysis, I hear the minister say that there were just discussions. And so I wanted to clarify if that's really what the minister is saying, especially in light of their past failed economic projects during the pandemic. Is he saying that they just had discussions, and that was the basis for making a multi-million-dollar agreement?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, in respect of the member's line of questioning here, I mean, I guess we could have spent $500,000 to do an in-depth analysis on a $1.5 million program, but I would sooner put the money in the hands of the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce, who represents the business community across Manitoba, to make those assessments in terms of the best allocation of that money. I would say they've done a pretty good job. 388 vendors pivoted to an e-commerce platform. 1,700 businesses received reopening support. I mean, that 1.5 is one component of $50 million that we provided to the chambers for long-term recovery through various programs. We had the dine-in restaurants program. We had the Shop Local campaign, as mentioned, Digital Manitoba Initiative. We had the Retrain program. And we tried to keep these programs as simplistic as possible so we didn't burden Manitoba businesses with extra red tape. And I think that's pretty critical here. The Retrain program in particular, I mean, we great reviews from a few fronts. We had from the Economic Development Winnipeg, saying that business leaders say this funding was given them the flexibility to not only pursue training and upskilling for employees, but recruit and train new employees. I'm confident this program has put businesses in a strong position for growth as we move past the pandemic. And you go back to, in fact, Chuck Davidson of the Manitoba Chamber. His feedback, we're thrilled with the program's success. Especially SMEs as a valuable long-term investment in agile, highly skilled workforce. So, I mean, there's all kinds of positive comments coming out of some of the funding that we've provided to businesses through the course of the pandemic. And as I say, these programs aren't all over, but we are continuing and actually bringing new programs to the front to try to make sure that we get Manitoba businesses continuing to run, up and running, and get Manitobans back to work. And quite frankly, Manitobans are back to work. We're the second lowest unemployment rate in the country, and the challenge really now is finding additional labor to support business activity. So if anybody wants to work, Manitoba is the place to be.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Thanks, Minister, for the response. Just wondering out loud, wonder if the vacancy rate wasn't as high, there would have been larger capacity for the department to do some of this analysis work. But I just want to move on to ask, did the government play any role in Good Local receiving the $500,000 at any point along the way? Just want to know if there was any role in the government. I know you said the chamber chose Good Local. I want to know if the government played a role in any aspect of the process in order for Good Local to receive that $500,000.
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just had some clarification from staff here. So I'm understanding there was two separate contracts. There was one contract with the chamber for the 1.5 million contract, and then there was a separate contract to make up that 50 million as well. So two separate contracts from my understanding. From my knowledge, there was no government direction in terms of how that funding would roll out. So I have no reason to believe that government would be directing that 1.5 million. I mean, 19-page contract here that says to the chamber, you go ahead and roll this program out and use your discretion. That's the way I see it.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Okay, so thanks for the minister for stating that and clarifying that. I also wanted to just clarify, were there any conditions set on this amount that went to the chamber for the money that ended up, the 500,000 ended up for Good Local? Any conditions or criteria that the government might have set out that might have, indicated that the money would have gone to Good Local, or perhaps even a review that was taking place before the contract was signed with Good Local? The government might have been in between there reviewing the possible candidates for the money before it was actually given. There was along any way was the government reviewing or aware of these different processes before the money was chosen to give provided to Good Local?
The honourable minister.
Yeah, I think we better be maybe clear from the outset how this all transpired, the whole retail shop local. It was actually the Chambers of Commerce came to government with an idea that we should invest $1.5 million in a retail shop local program. As a result of those discussions, a 19-page contract was put together outlining the stipulations around the $1.5 million and how it would be administered. And clearly there's a reporting mechanism back to government. The onus was on the chamber to report back to government. That's why we had, out of the $1.5 million, 388 vendors pivot to an e-commerce platform, and 1,700 businesses received reopening support. So that's the mechanism and that's the process that happened. So this was not necessarily initiated by government, but as again, I went back to the stakeholder discussions we had through the process. That's where the chamber, Manitoba Chambers, came to government and said, we have an idea for a program that we think will assist local vendors. So as a result of that initiation by the chambers, the document was put together to frame how the money could be spent, and then the reporting mechanism back to government.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
So, I mean, as far as I understand, the department, on an annual basis, is providing $86 million of services out to businesses in Manitoba. And it seems like this one is 1.5 million. It seemed like they were, gave the money to the chamber with almost no oversight or no criteria or no return on investment. So it just seems a little bit, like unusual that this would happen, and that a lot of this, given the context of the work the department does, that they would give almost free rein for the chamber to use this money. And that, so much of it, 1/3 of it, ended up with one business. And so it strikes me as rather odd. And I just wanted to ask the minister how that came to be. Why is that the case?
The honourable minister.
Well, to the contrary, I think it's rather odd that we have a 19-page document signed between the government and the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce for $1.5 million. I mean, if that is an oversight, to me that's almost overkill on oversight. Clearly it's laid out here, the rules around how this money would be spent, the reporting mechanism back to government, and that's why we have these numbers. The $1.5 million had a positive impact to 388 vendors plus 1,700 other businesses. So I would suggest $1.5 million was a pretty wise investment when you get those kinds of results. Very rarely do you see a 19-page document for $1.5 million investment going back to local small businesses.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
So I'd like to just, at this point, just table the Good Locals final report. I have it here. This is the final report for the $500,000. So this was 100% provincial funding. The financial report was to the Chamber of Commerce. And I just wanted to ask some questions around this, and the minister walked through this a little bit. Maybe he can explain it in more detail, because I believe the member for Fort White had previously said that he brought a proposal to the Chamber of Commerce about this idea. And I think the minister just said that the Chamber came to government with this idea about the contribution agreement. And so maybe you can just put a little bit more context about the sequence of events there and how it came to be that Good Local was chosen for this unique arrangement.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I think members opposite are chasing a dog that doesn't hunt here. So I don't know the chain of events. Apparently the member thinks that Good Local came to the chamber with an idea. Appears to be a good idea. That could well have been the order of how this happened. In turn, it appears that the Chamber of Commerce thought this was a good idea as well. So then the Chamber of Commerce comes to the government and says, we've got an idea here to support Manitoba businesses, and looks like it's only going to cost $1.5 million. Why don't we get into a contract and make this happen? So government said, well, you guys are close to the action. Let's put the parameters in a 19-page contract so that you're covered off, we're covered off, and there's a reporting mechanism back. So from there, it appears to me that the Chamber of Commerce said, okay, let's get Good Local to develop a platform that will support Manitoba businesses. And the Manitoba businesses in the middle of a pandemic prior to Christmas season. So getting this platform operational at a timely fashion, at a timely time as well, supported 388 vendors and 1,700 businesses. I mean, we have the list here of all the businesses that were supported through the Good Local platform. Clearly, the Chamber thought it was a good deal. I would suggest the 388 vendors and 1,700 businesses that were supported by this program, I would say they probably view it as a good deal too.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
So I know that in the community there are other businesses that do similar, if not almost the same type of work as Good Local. Were those businesses or were any others in the community given the opportunity to bring forward a proposal like this to the Chamber?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, you'd have to ask the Chamber about that process.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
So in March this year, the Chamber of Commerce reported that Good Local had generated $850,000 in sales. This is as a result of this arrangement. So what analysis was done or is being done on the result of this deal?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So we have a report here from the President and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. I don't know how many pages it is. It's a substantial report about the success, quite frankly, of the Good Local project. And again, 388 vendors, 1,700 businesses seemed happy with the program, seemed to be successful, supporting Manitoba business prior to the Christmas season. It appears to me that the Manitoba Chamber have fulfilled their obligations under the 19-page contract that was signed with the Manitoba Chambers. I don't know what else the member would like us to do.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
The government and the minister stated, his priority for having a value for money approach. So does the minister believe spending $500,000 on this project to generate $850,000 in sales as good value for money? And further to that, the minister just referenced emails. Wondering if he could be able to table that. The last part was about being able to table that letter. The email that you just referenced.
I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Yeah, so I think we have to put this in perspective for members opposite. So the number he reported, the 877 or 850 in sales, that was a reporting period of only November of 2020 to March of 2021. So a very limited period of time. So there was 388 vendors at 850,000 in sales, additional 147,000 in gift card sales. That created 27 new jobs, of which 9 became full-time. And I think the members should recognize that this platform still exists. So that generated that much activity in a matter of 5 months at the most, but that platform still exists today. That is still creating economic activity for those business communities. It's probably creating more jobs, and including full-time jobs. So if you want to talk value for money, it sounds like we're doing pretty well. And I understand, this was some initiative that was brought forward to the chambers, and the chamber clearly decided that it was positive. In fact, I had a quote from Mr. Davidson that Looking back at the results in terms of what we're able to achieve with that, I would do it again in a heartbeat because I think it did exactly what it needed to do.
The honourable member from St. Vital.
Thank you. So there's a local business owner, Tara Davis. She was obviously, I'm sure the minister's aware, she was quite upset about the arrangement with Good Local, as they and her business had already been supporting local business for years. Many of these products have e-commerce. And she says that the infrastructure was already there. Had that money been distributed more fairly, that a lot of more businesses and all these businesses would be thriving. So how did Good Local get chosen over the alternatives that were already existing in Manitoba? And what does the minister say to Tara Davis?
The honourable minister.
Well, to be clear, government did not make the choice here. The Manitoba Chambers of Commerce made the choice on reviewing this initiative. And clearly, the Chamber of Commerce were quite satisfied with this initiative. We just talked about some of the economic activity that generated, even within a 5-month period, of $850,000 in sales, 147 in gift card sales, 27 new jobs, 9 of which became full-time. And again, this particular platform continues to provide services to Manitobans and create economic activity for Manitoba businesses. And the Chamber of Commerce said they would do this program again in a heartbeat. We also supplied Manitoba businesses $650 million in support over the course of 2 years. I'm sure that not every business in Manitoba is going to be happy with the supports that we've provided, the mechanisms that we provided. And I feel for the member that, or the person that the member referenced. We were trying to support the business community. We were trying to support Manitobans. We were trying to support, in particular, the concept of buy local. Clearly, 388 vendors, 1,700 other businesses bought into this program. There's going to be people that maybe feel there was other options. I can't speak to that, but from all reports, this program looked to be very successful, and I would say continues to be very successful.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
The minister said that the total of 850 or 877 was just for about 5 months. Can the minister provide what that total amount is now? And what sort of analysis, if any, is the government looking at of the Good Local project by the minister's department or Treasury Board? Did it really live up to expectations, not just from the 5-month time frame, but to even how it is now?
The honourable minister.
Well, we don't go back and evaluate all $650 million in terms of what our supports to communities. We did have a 19-page contract with the Chambers of Commerce to provide a report back to us on the investment over a period of time. And clearly the $1.5 million investment, in this case $500,000 investment, has created an ongoing platform for Manitoba businesses. Even just in a 5-month period, benefited 388 vendors, 1,700 other businesses received reopening support, gift card sales over and above that, creation of new jobs in that 5-month period. We could go back and spend several $1 million on that $500,000 investment if you'd like us to do that. But I would sooner invest that $1 million or $2 million in making sure Manitobans get back to work and have the opportunities in front of them. So the reports here are saying that this is a successful program, even during that 5-month period, and it appears to be operational today. So I'm sure it's providing economic opportunity for Manitobans. So I don't know why we would start throwing more money after a project that appears to be working quite effectively.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Thank you. I just heard something that kind of seemed very concerning that the minister mentioned, that they don't go back and evaluate up to $650 million of investment that they're making in the economy. How do you not evaluate whether this type of money being spent by the government is being spent wisely, it's being spent effectively? This is to grow our small business through a very challenging time. And if we're not spending the effort to evaluate whether this is being spent wisely, then how do we know what we're doing is actually working? And how do we know that the next project we're going to put forward will be effective or whether it'll fail? It's very concerning if the minister is not going back to evaluate $650 million being spent. So I wanted to clarify and ask the minister if that's the case.
The honourable minister.
Yes, and I'll be very clear, and I don't think the member wants to be putting words in my mouth here, that I said we don't evaluate every one of the $650 million. Now, clearly in this particular case, there was a 19-page contract with clear stipulations, reporting mechanisms back on this. The Manitoba Chambers have provided the terms of the conditions within that reporting period. This particular platform continues to operate, from what I understand, operating quite effectively. In terms of the other $650 million, we do have discussions with our stakeholders. We continue to have discussions with stakeholders in terms of seeing how effective they were. Now, I could go through the list of positive feedback we're getting from some of those investments that were made for Manitobans, but I don't know if the member wants to sit through all that. The reality is, I think we've made some positive investments. We do have a look at those to make sure we're getting much value for money. And I go back to our latest investment of $1 million to provide some support for 4 of the sectors that were hit the hardest. And they speak very highly of those investments that we're making in conjunction with them. I mean, this is all about having discussions as we work through the pandemic about how we could support business and how we can support Manitobans. Obviously a very challenging time for everybody, but we thought it was critical to get money out the door. And in a lot of cases, for instance, another contract with the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce, $50 million on a number of those programs. And again, challenging time for everybody, but we thought it was worthwhile to get those investments back into the community.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
So the minister doesn't evaluate every one of the programs. Can he elaborate about which ones he does evaluate and which ones he doesn't? And how does he make that determination?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just want to go through some of the programs for the member. So our Bridge Grant program provided almost $300 million to close to 16,000 small and medium-sized business, nonprofits, and charities. Clearly, there's some gaps there in some of the federal programs that we invested money in there. Obviously, very positive response from those 16,000 businesses that were impacted and nonprofits. Again, the $50 million for long-term recovery supported 4,300 businesses. That goes into the dine-in restaurant relief, the Shop Local program, Digital Manitoba Initiative, and Retrain Manitoba program. In fact, we've had over 1,000 applications for the Digital Manitoba Initiative. Clearly, that points to a very successful program. Lots of positive comments about the Retrain Manitoba program. And again, these programs are all over and above what we have for existing programming to support business and to support labor development here in Manitoba. The hospitality relief sector, $8 million to 340 businesses in the accommodation and tourism sector. Again, very well received. Sector support program, $22 million. And again, an additional $1 million announced just last week for four sectors that have been impacted substantially by that. The charter transport program, almost $2 million there to support them. And then probably the bigger one was the pandemic wage support programs. That's $88 million to help close to 7,800 employers hire over 30,000 employees. So at the end of the day, with all these investments that we've provided through the pandemic, the economy is up and running. We have more people working than we had prior to the pandemic. We have the second lowest unemployment rate in the country. So I would say these programs have been quite successful in getting businesses and, quite frankly, Manitobans through the pandemic. Conversely, we're looking for more people in Manitoba to go to work. That is the number one issue we're hearing from the business community is a shortage of labor. So I think we have, through these investments, weathered the storm pretty successfully, and we're looking for other opportunities to upskill Manitobans, bring Manitobans into Manitoba to work, because there's tremendous opportunity for work here in Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you. And so I want to just frame this issue. We've been speaking about this for roughly the last hour or so. And this goes back to what I mentioned in my opening comments about the type of recovery we want to have, particularly one that's focused on the people who need the support the most. And so we have a situation here, right? Money that went from the government to the Chamber of Commerce to Good Local. In a process by the minister's own admission today, wasn't analyzed before it was developed, right? A process that was controlled by the Chamber of Commerce, by frankly, who the people in the Chamber of Commerce knew, by their friends who were closely connected, who approached them without the knowledge of the minister, whether there were other people given the opportunity, an equal opportunity, to have the same program awarded to them. And we know a business owner who did a similar line of work wasn't afforded this opportunity, a woman, Tara Davis. We know that that money was invested into Good Local, that went to support small businesses, and to generate sales that the government, by its own mission, hasn't fully analyzed the success or failure of that program. And when we're worried about our economic recovery, And even the minister highlighted some where we're at with our current economic condition. We also suffer from an affordability challenge right now. We're also suffering from growing income inequality. So our concern with the pandemic recovery is that we don't just help the businesses that are already doing well, but we're helping the businesses that really, really need the help. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we're giving equitable opportunities when it comes to government resources spent on those businesses that need it the most. And this case, I think, is a prime example of a failure to do that, where it appears that a business that was close to the chamber, had that access, they knew the right person to talk to, who again could approach the government through their conversations about a project that ended up awarding them $500,000. When other businesses in Manitoba were left on the wayside, maybe ones that had suffered with the pandemic even greater. And as I highlighted in my opening comments, many of those people were women, were members of the Black community, people of color, and Indigenous people, business owners in our community. And so I want to know from the minister, does this sit well with him? Does this sit right with him? Is this the process that the government's taking with the economic recovery? And not just with the recovery, but also with the operation of the government for economic development, or the government in general? Is it about who you know? Is it about what the connections you have? Or will there actually be an equitable access to government resources as we together get ourselves out of the pandemic? I'd like to know the minister's response to that.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, I guess that's where this line of question is going. I mean, clearly the opposition members want to play politics with the pandemic. That's certainly never been our intent. Our intent has always been to support Manitoba businesses. And by supporting Manitoba businesses, we're supporting Manitobans. That's why we've committed on the business side $650 million. That's only part of our $3.1 billion in support to Manitobans during the COVID time. And clearly we're still dealing with COVID. And that's why we're going to continue to support Manitobans. Now, I'm respectful of the opinion put forward by the member opposite, but I don't necessarily agree with his opinion. He's clearly trying to connect some dots here that aren't connectable. We've been consulting with Manitobans since the start of this pandemic. We've put money out there. We rely on the business community to make decisions about, in some cases, where this money is best spent. We've been taking their advice through the course of the pandemic. We will continue to take advice of Manitobans and the business community as we work our way through this pandemic. We've set aside in our budget, in our department, over $100 million to make sure that Manitobans have every opportunity. Doesn't matter which Manitoban it is, they have the opportunity to use our services and funding, whether it be upskilling or any other services that we have in terms of market access. We're there to support every Manitoba from every part of the province, wherever we can. There is tremendous opportunities here in Manitoba. Again, with the second lowest unemployment rate in the country, Manitoba businesses crying for people in the workplace. We recognize that it's not just education and training, but it's other social supports that are required. That's why we're working closely with the federal government to supply very affordable daycare as part of that discussion. So that there's a lot of other things that we are doing as a government to make sure that Manitobans have the opportunity, if they choose to work, they have every opportunity to work here in Manitoba. And in addition to that, we know people from all across the world want to come to Manitoba for the opportunities that we have. We have had a very successful immigration program, provincial nominee program. We think that can be enhanced to make sure we have more opportunities for people seeking opportunity in Manitoba to come and work, live, and raise a family here. So we're doing everything we can on that front as well.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
So I think the minister's familiar with that term, you know, the K-shaped recovery, where we all kind of go down, economic suffer during the course of the pandemic, but then it kind of splits off. And there's some people whose recovery takes a lot longer and slides along the bottom, and then some who tends to peak up more quickly. And this is what I'm asking the minister is, are the programs that he's putting forward just perpetuating that type of split recovery? Is the minister taking proactive approaches in his recovery to address that split in the recovery, to address the businesses and the individuals who suffer economically? Because as the process that we've just been speaking about for over the past hour, it certainly seems like there are some people who have more access. And the minister just said in his last comment that he wants to ensure that this process, that everyone has an opportunity in Manitoba. But, you know, Tara Davis, as she said, she didn't get that opportunity. By her own words, she didn't get that opportunity. The minister office could have asked the Chamber of Commerce, did you do a scan for like businesses in Manitoba? And we can maybe award them all some money. Did the minister take it upon his own self and ask his department, hey, Chamber's brought this idea from us. Are there any other businesses that do this work where we can evaluate them, each one of them, and see which one can best fit the needs of Manitobans? Or maybe award it to 2 or 3 of them that do this similar work. That would be a way that we don't have this K-shaped recovery, this split recovery, where some businesses who face barriers continue to sink as we try to recover, and other barriers continue to exceed to greater levels. And so I want to just put that to the minister again. Are the programs that he's put forward to help us recover just exacerbating this K-shaped recovery that we're going through, that we're experiencing right now, and perpetuating that income inequality we see in Manitoba?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly, you know, the COVID support programs were, we think, pretty accessible to most people. It was our intent to keep those support programs as general as possible, so that as many Manitobans could use those support programs as possible. And obviously want to support small business in that endeavor. The member is correct, though. Through the pandemic, a number of companies weren't impacted as much. Some, quite frankly, were quite successful through the pandemic. Others, greater implications through that pandemic. I would say we're doing everything we can to make sure that our programs are accessible to as many Manitobans as possible. I would say what we've seen here in the last few years is the workforce becoming more mobile and wanting to change occupations, change careers, go back to school at different levels of schooling. We want to support that. That's why we've set aside $100 million on our budget to support that. And in terms of employment supports as well, like over the last year, we have delivered employment and training services to close to 28,000 Manitoba job seekers, including a wide range of target and universal services to support unemployment and underemployed individuals, existing workers, people with disability, newcomers, and youth. We've supported over 15,000 Manitobans with employment and training services through 13 of our jobs and skill development centers all across the province. Overall, more than 7,500 Indigenous job seekers have been supported. And we've had more than 7,800 newcomer job seekers supported as well. So clearly, when it comes to employment supports, I think we are seeing a broad range of Manitobans seeking those types of supports. We want to make sure that every Manitoban, doesn't matter where they are in this province, has accessibility to these support programs. And really, these programs are about a way up. How do we help people move up in their career path? So that's really what we're here to do, and we're here to assist wherever we can.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Thank you. I think the minister for the response, but I think it was a bit underwhelming, especially for those people who, see some failures by the government during the course of the pandemic recovery to specifically target and help support women-led businesses, Indigenous-led businesses, Black-owned businesses, and I think businesses led by people of color. And I think that, and I would actually just put to the minister a challenge to do more, an honest effort to do more, to look more concretely at steps to ensure that those people in business, those workers have even greater opportunity to be successful in Manitoba. I want to move on to Budget 2021, an announcement in there that created a new private sector-led economic development agency called Invest Manitoba. The legislation establishing Invest Manitoba was passed as part of BITSA, but however, since then we've learned it's been abandoned and won't come into force. Can the minister provide some insights into why the government was pursuing this agency, Invest Manitoba, in the first place, and why it was abandoned?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the line of questioning from the member opposite. As I alluded to earlier on, there is so many different approaches to economic development, and there's a lot of approaches in terms of what that framework looks like in terms of how you move forward from a governance perspective on economic development. And we can argue and debate governance models when it comes to economic development all day. And some forms work for some governments, some work better for other governments, and people have different philosophies in terms of what framework works best. I think the member knows quite well that we had a change in leadership here just recently, and under her leadership, she's created a different governance model when it comes to economic development. So we've gone away from the Invest Manitoba model to a slightly different model. The new model involves the Economic Development Board of Cabinet, which will be chaired by the Premier, and we will have another number of ministers on that particular board as well. So it's more of I'll call it a whole of government approach to economic development. I would say the concept gets decision makers at the board level to make decisions quicker and making sure we don't lose any opportunities when it comes to economic development here in Manitoba. And I think it allows us an opportunity to modernize how we do economic development within government by providing a coordinated approach to economic development across government departments. It allows us to provide a back and forth and communication with the business community as well, so that we fully appreciate the opportunities that they may see and that we can respond quickly to that. And I think we all recognize that we have to make sure we are attracting investment here in Manitoba. And I believe that that board can act as a catalyst to do that. And that board can also act as a catalyst for doing analysis, market intelligence, work with our other partners in economic development to make sure that we are seizing those opportunities. And quite frankly, I would say providing direction for government and our other external partners on economic development. So that's the concept. The board will be supported by a secretariat. We have brought Michael Swiston in as the secretary to support the board. And we're in the process of establishing a secretariat to support the board. And that secretariat will be existing government staff. We also have the opportunity to bring in private sector individuals on a contract basis to provide advice for short-term programming. But in essence, that secretariat will be supportive of economic opportunities or projects that either come to Manitoba or exist in Manitoba and they want to set up shop here or they want to expand here in Manitoba, and how do we help them navigate through the government bureaucracy to obtain what they want to obtain. So in essence, a new approach, I'd say a different approach to economic development from a governance perspective.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
So is the minister saying that essentially the Premier's Economic Development Board is replacing Invest Manitoba? It was created to replace what would have been Invest Manitoba, and it will have a similar goal to bring in investment. That will be the goal of the Economic Development Board, the Premier's Economic Development Board, will be to bring in investment. I just wanted to, they're almost different models, but like for like objectives.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I would say exactly right. I mean, we talk globally about economic development, and there's a lot of pieces to the economic development puzzle. But at the end of the day, I think we, for the most part, measure outcomes in terms of economic development similar. And that's about creating opportunities for Manitobans, creating wealth for Manitobans, and allowing Manitobans to live, work, and play here in Manitoba. And that's really economic development, in my mind, is about the future. It's about the future of Manitoba. And if we can provide opportunities for not just us, but for our children and our grandchildren, that is what's going to grow our economy. And at the end of the day, and I'll go back to my opening comments, by growing our economy, creating wealth within Manitoba, that's how we support the social programming vis-a-vis health, education, social services that Manitobans have come to expect. So that's why it's so important for us as a government to grow our economy and have a real focus on economic development. And there's different approaches to carrying out economic development when it comes to governance. Under the Premier's direction, we've seen this approach work in the past, and this is the approach that we've taken. But again, it's about creating economic development opportunities. And as the member referenced, the investment component is one piece of that. I think anything we can do to attract investment is positive. Anything we can do to enhance trade, because we are a trading jurisdiction, is helpful. Anything that we can do to improve entrepreneurship, innovation, commercialization is positive. How we work with our local markets and our global markets is important. And then also the whole idea of having a modern system, a modern government to respond quickly to economic development opportunities is really important as well. And government certainly has to provide direction on that front. And we do have a lot of really good agencies external to government that are working on the economic development file. But I think it's critical that government give direction to those agencies to make sure that they are supporting and working collaboratively to provide those outcomes that we need. So we think this is a positive mechanism to make this happen. Obviously, it's new, so there is some growing at this point in time, but we're excited about the concept and this approach to economic development.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you. So since the minister is not planning on moving it forward with Invest Manitoba, will they be repealing the legislation that passed to create it?
The Honourable Minister.
That'll be a broader government discussion.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Okay, so not confirming whether it's going to be repealed or not. All right, so I wanted to move forward to asking a little bit about Research Manitoba. We've seen in Research Manitoba that funding get reduced year after year. You used to receive about $17 million per year. That was cut to $15 million in 2017-18. then cut again to $12 million in 18-19. Can the minister confirm how much this year's budget will have allotted for Research Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, in terms of Research Manitoba, I do want to thank the folks over at Research Manitoba for the good work they do. A very strong board in place over there with a broad range of expertise. We supply Research Manitoba just over $12 million in this year's budget. That is the same as last year. Very similar to the preceding 3 years. And just a note on the pandemic, I know they've allocated some money to deal with the pandemic response as well, and research on the pandemic. Very critical as we work through the pandemic. And I will also say Research Manitoba use our investment to leverage additional funds, whether it be the federal government or other private sector resources as well. So we appreciate the work they do on that front in terms of leveraging the provincial investment of over $12 million.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank the Minister for the response. It's important to, I'm glad the Minister thanked the work that Research Manitoba does. They do very important work. And they're critical to a lot of the businesses in our province. They help to develop them in terms of the research that they put forward frames some of the projects that become very important and impactful in our economy. So I'm curious why the budget line for Research Manitoba would remain flat this year after seeing several years, consecutive years of decreases, when the minister even says himself today that it's very important. They do very important work, especially coming out of a pandemic and pandemic work, related work. It's really important. Businesses rely on this type of research, and the businesses I've spoken with have said that we need to have more research and development in our province. So why is the minister just keeping the budget flat for Research Manitoba after years of consecutive cuts to it? Why not restore some of that funding?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I caution the members opposite to continue to use the word cuts. I recognize it's been flat in terms of the last 5 years of funding to Research Manitoba, but I would certainly caution against some of the vocabulary that we hear coming from across the aisle. I will say Research Manitoba does a great job of leveraging additional money from federal government and private sector as well. When it comes to formulating a budget, it's always a balancing act for government to determine where to put resources. And clearly, Manitobans have asked us to deal directly with healthcare. That's why we've made a record investment of $7.2 billion into healthcare funding. That's $1 billion more than when we came into office. They've also asked us to deal with the surgical and diagnostic backlog that has been created by the pandemic. That's why we've committed to $110 million to address those backlogs. We want to make sure that money is being invested as quickly as possible so that we can reduce the backlog that Manitobans are facing. And we know this impacts Manitoba families, and that's why it is so important that we respond to the needs of Manitobans and Manitoba families. On the topic of research and healthcare, Manitoba does have acquired over time some very valuable healthcare information. And I think it's incumbent upon us as a government to unlock the potential that exists in some of that information that we have acquired over the years. And I think there is real value in finding out what that potential is. And that's why we're working closely with Research Manitoba and others in unlocking that potential that exists for some of that information that we have here in Manitoba. And if we can unlock that, I think it will go a long way in terms of improving health for not just those in Manitoba, but in the reality, those across Canada and potentially North America. So Research Manitoba will play an important role in that, and I think other areas of government have an interest in this and moving it forward. So again, I think there's real opportunity when it comes to health information and research.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
So yeah, I mean, Invest Manitoba uses the funds it has to leverage further investment. I think that's part of its job to do that. Obviously, it provides huge benefits to health research and pushing that along. I'm still confused as to why the government sees fit to keep the funding at such a reduced level compared to what it gets. And I say this because healthcare has been such an issue over the last few years with the pandemic. And what better place to put our research in is to solve some of those healthcare issues, not only because of the pandemic, but because we have an aging population and healthcare needs continue to grow. As well, economically, just talk to the people at BAM, Bioscience Association Manitoba, and they'll tell you the economic potential of healthcare research. So again, can the Minister put to him again and see if he can clearly answer why wasn't more funding allocated or restored to the previous level for Research Manitoba after several years of cuts?
The honourable minister.
Again, I challenge the member opposite on the term cuts. I mean, the level of funding to Research Manitoba has been consistent for 5 years in a row. And again, they've been able to leverage last year close to $20 million on our investment. I think the member has lost sight of the fact that we are investing a record $7.2 billion this year alone directly into healthcare. Manitobans have asked us to respond and strengthen our healthcare system. We're investing an extra $1 billion more than when we came into office in healthcare. And it really is about supporting frontline services for healthcare. We're investing in capital on the healthcare front as well. We recognize there's challenges in educating, recruiting, retaining a lot of different staff within the healthcare system, whether it be doctors, nurses, EMS, paramedics, nursing assistants. We're facing those challenges, just as every other jurisdiction in the country is facing those challenges. To try to address that, we are investing record amounts in healthcare. Certainly our department is supportive of investing in training for those healthcare professionals as well. So it's a whole of government approach to try to deal with healthcare and the challenges that we have within healthcare. So it can't be lost on the members opposite that we are making record investments in healthcare, and at the same time being supportive of the work that's being done at Research Manitoba.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Thank the Minister for the answer. Although I think that, compared to the previous years, in the past years, where there was higher levels of funding for research in Manitoba, obviously, if that was provided this year, they would be able to use that additional funding to leverage even more dollars. And they do a great job of that. And this would be an even greater boom to our economy and potential economic driver. So I'm disappointed to see the cut in this area. I know the Minister attended the Chamber event yesterday and heard the brief presentation by BAM as to the economic impact that health, sciences, biosciences, pharmaceuticals play in Manitoba. One of the large facilities I have is in the riding of my colleague, the member for Transcona. Creates a lot of jobs. And it's confusing that in a time when, and I will add that these are good quality, high-paying jobs, well above the minimum wage, which hasn't increased very much under this government. And so I want to just ask the Minister again, is he considering making these types of investments into our economy in areas which would provide research and dollars to spur economic growth, in fields which we need, like health sciences, and create good quality, high-paying jobs? These are opportunities to have win-win-wins in our economy. And it seems like the government hasn't spent as much dollars this year as it has spent, as was spent in years past. So again, my question is, why aren't we spending as much as we've had previous years, when this is a perfect opportunity to invest in our economy and get many different wins at the same time?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will agree with the member that the whole bioscience sector of our economy is very important, and I don't think people realize the significance and the size of the Bioscience Association here in Manitoba. And we also support sectors directly, and we support the bioscience sector directly. We have an annual allocation of $360,000 to support the Bioscience Association directly. And we support a lot of other sectors in this area as well. I mean, you talk about aerospace, agriculture, all of those things certainly are related to the healthcare and bioscience sectors. So we do support those sectors on an individual basis. Again, the funding level for Research Manitoba has been consistent for 5 years now. But we have chosen in this budget as well to increase healthcare support directly to the tune of $7.2 billion, with a $110 million allocation to the surgical and diagnostic backlog. That has been top of mind for Manitobans for some time as we work our way through the pandemic. The other issue that's become top of mind for Manitobans is affordability. And that's why in this budget, and we as a government have been committed to allowing Manitobans to keep as much money in their pockets as possible. That's why we've reduced taxes to Manitobans and in support of them. In fact, we'd like to get more money back to Manitobans through the education property tax relief program and the legislation before the House to the tune of probably $350 million that we'd like to get back in Manitobans' hands. But apparently the opposition don't see it that way. We as a government in this year's budget, we have committed over $100 million in our department alone to support Manitobans and educating Manitobans and training Manitobans and in getting Manitobans back to work. And I'm happy that the place we're at in terms of getting more people back to work post-pandemic than we had going into the pandemic. I think that's been a very positive sign for us. We've made significant investments to the tune of $650 million to support Manitobans on the business side. That part of $3.1 billion total that's gone into fighting COVID. And we know there's more investments that will have to be made in our battle against COVID. But we're certainly prepared to do that. So record investments in healthcare, record investments in education, record investments in social services. I would say potentially record investments in supporting Manitobans' training, upskilling, and getting them ready for the workforce as well.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
I hope to get a couple more questions in if the minister, 2-3 more questions in if the minister within the time remaining. I wanted to ask the minister this. I know it's not his department directly, but it'll obviously have an impact on our economy in Manitoba. We're set to have the lowest minimum wage in the country in October, come October. So will the minister elaborate on how this will affect our economic development in Manitoba?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think as the member knows, we have legislation in place to provide the mechanism for increases in the minimum wage here in Manitoba. And we've had that in place for a number of years. It's my understanding that we have approximately 6% of the workforce currently at minimum wage level. I've asked my department to do an evaluation in terms of where those 6% are employed. Are they employed in the hospitality sector, where they also have the advantage of service tips, or are these other people being employed elsewhere? So I'm looking forward to digging down a little bit on terms of who is actually making minimum wage. Obviously, we'll have a look at other jurisdictions and what they're doing. And it's an interesting dynamic when this question comes up in this era that we're in. The reality is, and this is what I'm hearing from businesses across the province, we actually have a shortage of employees. We have a shortage in our workforce. So the business community recognizes that they're having to pay staff more money to recruit and retain them. And that's really the reality that we're in. Talked with a number of members of the Business Council last night, and that's the situation they find themselves in. And as the member would know, Manitoba workforce is more mobile than ever before. It used to be not too long ago, once a person had a job, they would stay with that job and stay with that company. That's not the case anymore. Manitobans are looking for opportunities. They're looking for opportunities to increase their skill level, their education level, and we're providing that for them. So there is certainly tremendous opportunities for them here in Manitoba. So I'm curious about, the number of people who is at minimum wage, how they're being impacted by minimum wage. I certainly look forward to those results, and I have obviously looking forward to what is occurring in other jurisdictions as well, and the implications those policy decisions are having for those people as well. So it's certainly something that we as a government are cognizant of. That's why we're doing the work to fully understand the implications of where we're at and any implications of where we may go into the future.
The hour being 12:30 p.m., committee rise, call in the speaker. The hour being 12:30 p.m., this House is adjourned and stands adjourned until 1:30 p.m. on Monday.